start this thing off is to begin with my entry in military service back in September 1939 at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I enlisted in D Company, 38th Infantry, 1st Battalion, 2nd Division. Spent about a year there. Participated then in the Louisiana maneuvers, 1940, and in the Louisiana and Carolina maneuvers back in 1941, early summer. And then later that year, they brought the division together at Fort Sam Houston, all three regiments, and stayed there until I was cadred out in April 1942 to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. To back up on that, to Fort Hood, Texas, Camp Hood at that time, to help set up a tank destroyer school to teach tactics and firing for tank destroyer units. And stayed there until August 42, and from there I transferred into what was then the Army Air Corps. Went to gunnery school at Harlingen, Texas. Finished there in early October. From there I went to Salt Lake City to armament school. Finished there, and I think it was in December, shortly before Christmas. Then was assigned to Tucson, Arizona, with his foreman combat crews, B-24s. And we took our first phase of combat training at Tucson, which at that time was known as Davis Monathan Field. And from there we went to our second phase at Alamogordo, New Mexico, and finished the second phase and went into a third phase training at Clovis, New Mexico. Finished that, and from there we was assigned overseas. We had to report in to give us a 6-day leave. We had to report into Lincoln, Nebraska. We picked up our aircraft there, tested it out, and headed for England. And I was assigned to the 44th Bomb Group at RAF Shipdham, which is roughly 120 miles northeast of London, up in the area of England known as East Anglia. I was assigned to the 506 Bomb Squadron, 44th Bomb Group, 2nd Division, 14th Wing, and 8th Air Force. We started flying missions out of there into France, Germany. Hit the sub-pens at Saint Nazaire and the sub-pens at Kiel, and flew several missions into Germany in the Saar, the Ruhr Valley, in the Saarbrücken area. In 1943, we were assigned to a mission in North Africa. We split out of England one plane at a time, and nobody knew for sure where we were going, except the navigator had a set of coordinates that he had to fly so much time on each coordinate, which finally brought us out at Africa. And it was supposed to have been a real secret move with the way they did it. However, that night, after the whole group came back together at Algiers, one of the guys had a little battery-powered radio, and we turned it on and was listening to Radio Berlin, and Axis Sally came on, welcomed the 44th Bomb Group to the sands of North Africa, made the remark that it was quite a change from the green field of East Anglia. So much for a secret mission. Here's the next morning we took off for a little place over in Libya known as Benghazi. And that was one of Benito Mussolini's favorite hideouts, swimming in the Mediterranean. And we were stationed about 6 miles out of Benghazi, the base, the old Italian base known as Benina, Maine. Into Italy and up into Austria, Wienerstadt, Regensburg, and Foggia, Italy. We bombed Rome. The first time Rome was bombed, we hit the Vittorio Marshalling Yards, which was approximately a mile from Vatican City. And we had to drop the bombs individually because they did not want any of them going into the Vatican City area. And the strike photos later showed there wasn't a bomb even came close to the Vatican City. So the pickle dropping Norden bomb site worked pretty good. Missions and support preparations for the Sicilian invasion. We bombed several places in Sicily, Catania, Palermo, Reggio, different places there, and we also bombed at German headquarters in Catania the morning of the 10th of July, 43, in support of the invasion. And low altitude training missions out into the desert in preparation for what we didn't know was to come. And we flew, I don't know, probably 100 dang training missions out into the Libyan desert, and sometimes as far as 200 or 300 miles down into it. And it turned out that on the 1st of August rather, it turned out that all this low altitude bombing and strafing and everything was preparation for the low altitude mission into the Ploesti oil fields in Romania on the 1st of August 1943. If you know or have seen pictures of it, it was a pretty hairy deal to say the least. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, but I sure as hell wouldn't want to do it again. The outfit was shot up so damn bad we had to wait for replacements to come in for a couple of weeks. Finally, we got back in shape enough with enough aircraft to make our next mission on the 16th of August, which was, the target was the airfields around Foggia, known as, which is about 9 or 10 German fighter bases in a semicircle around the city of Foggia in the plains there. And that's where we met our Waterloo. That day, just a milk run turned out to be a hell of a lot worse. They estimated that some 400 fighters hit us, and the ME-109s knocked us out of formation and set our plane afire, so naturally we had to find a place to get out, so we bailed out. 2 of my crew was killed, the bombardier and navigator, before we bailed out. Was flying at about 26,000 at the time we was hit, and by the time we got out, I don't know how much altitude was lost. I was the last man out, and on the way down, everything was real quiet, and I kept hearing this real high, shrill noise behind me. I managed to turn around the stride line and turn myself around, and I'm looking at a couple of ME-109s with the black and white spinners coming right at me. The time a crew that was shot down that I'd gone through all the 2 training with had been machine gunned after they'd bailed out. And I figured, well, I done bought the farm. But they came right at me, and at the last split second, they dropped their left wing and made a tight turn around me. As they went around, the pilot in the lead 109 throwed his right hand up in a halfway salute I didn't have enough damn strength to even wave back. That's how scared I was. Float down to the ground. I imagine I went out at about somewhere around 18, 20,000. A long ways down anyway. So after I hit the ground, I was all tangled up in my shroud lines. And I busted my rear end on a huge rock. And I was trying to get out of the shroud lines, get untangled and get my harness off. And all of a sudden, I didn't even see him or hear him come up. In a perfect English voice, this guy said, "What's the matter, Sergeant? You having trouble?" I look up into the barrel of a Smicer submachine pistol, and the German sergeant standing there smiling at me. I said, "What the hell does it look like?" Only I didn't say hell. I said something, hell, 4-letter word, which I won't repeat here. So, parachute rolled up, got out of the shroud lines, rolled the thing up. They marched me down the hillside to a motorcycle with a sidecar. And there was another German soldier there. Anyway, I had to straddle the nose of the sidecar, hold my chute. Just one German kept the machine pistol pointed in my belly. And we rode, I don't know, seemed like 2 or 3 miles to a point where they had the rest of the crews that were shot down assembled. And it turned out there was 8 aircraft of our group were shot down, and they had 21 of the people rounded up there that was left alive. So they took us into a gathering point in a city called Putinza. They put them in the hospital, and the others was sent on to prison down in the side of a bluff there where they had cells built into this rock wall. And that's where we spent the night, the rest of us. The next day they put us on the train and took us to the city of Pescara, where they put us through a bunch of interrogation. And we spent, I think, 3 days there. And the third day, late in the afternoon, they put us on another train and headed us for the prison camp up at Solmona. And that's where we spent the rest of the time. It was a German camp, but it was primarily for British and Dominion troops. They had Gurkhas and Sudanese and Senegalese and South Africans, English, Canadians, you name it, they had it. In the British Empire, that's where they were. And eventually all 21 of us arrived there, and they had told us that we wouldn't be staying there, that we was sent there by mistake, that we would be sent on to Germany. Well, to stay in the prison camp there wasn't all that bad. We had a lot of fun throwing rocks at the guards. The real bad part of it was the food situation. You got 1 meal a day, and I won't elaborate on that, but if you want to get hungry, that's a good way to do it. So, on the 5th, was late evening of the 5th of September, then the 6th, we got to noticing things wasn't running quite normal around there. And later and later in the afternoon, just about getting dark, all of a sudden the Germans started shooting all the damn Italians that they had working in the camp, the cooks and everything. And we found out then that the Italians, or the Germans found out the Italians were capitulating the next day, the 7th of September. So they being ticked off, I guess, they just decided they'd get rid of a bunch of Italians, which they did, by shooting them. And later on, during all the smoke and confusion, 19 of us broke out through a hole in the wall that we'd busted through. And we headed out into the mountains, which wasn't very hard to do because it was all mountainous around that area anyway. So we bugged out. As soon as they found out, the Germans that is, found out that we had broke out, they started after us. For 3 days and nights, they made things kind of hot, chasing us with dogs, mostly Doberman pinchers and light aircraft, spotting us, and the dogs chasing us. But we waded in streams and did a little everything to dodge them, and finally got away from them and split up. Of course, we paired off, and I came out with a young guy about 2 years younger than me from New York City. Why he latched onto me, I'll never know. His name was Isabellino Dones, and he was from the Bronx, New York. So we started heading south, and we'd walk at night, hide in daytime. And all this time we were walking, every once in a while at night, he'd say, "Hey, Hickey, how do you know we're going south?" I'd tell him, I said, "Look, you see that star up there? That's Polaris, the North Star. I hang that thing over my left shoulder, and every so often I check to see that it's still there, and I keep going south." Oh, it's asking me that, and I don't know, we'd been out 8 or 10 days. Finally, I got tired of it, and I told him. We were sitting up on top of this mountain. It was a moonlight night. And he, "How do you know we're going south?" And I went that rigmarole again. I told him, I said, "Look, if you don't believe I know which way I'm going, you go your way, I'll go mine." And I took off. A little bit later, I don't think I'd gone 100 yards or so, and I heard his pitter-patter little feet coming up. He never did ask me anymore, "How do you know which way is south?" He had a pretty rough go of it several times. There was no organized resistance in Italy as far as underground. And the fascists, after the war, they was running rampant over there, so you didn't know who was a fascista or who wasn't. So we pretty much lived off the land, stealing goat cheese, figs. They were getting ripe about that time, and tomatoes and grapes. And that was basically our diet. This goat cheese in little round pans about 6 or 8 inches in diameter and about 2 inches thick, and set it out in the sun on a windowsill or some rooftop to ripen. And we would spot it, pick it up. And if you want worms, eat goat cheese. Came pretty close to getting caught. The people, Dones, could speak enough Italian to, understand and talk to him. And some of these people way out in the hills there, the men were all gone. Mostly it was just women and children. But he talked to them, and they're old men. Some places there was real old guys that was too old to fight a war, and they would feed us. And one time in particular, this lady, elderly lady, had fixed up a meal of, I don't know, vegetables and noodles and a bunch of stuff. Smelled real good. Had olive oil. Well, there was a boy about 7 or 8 years old there, and this old man, and I noticed the boy, after a little while, wasn't there. I told Dones, something was up. At least I thought. But what had happened, this old man had sent the boy out to keep watch We just sat down at the table, and the lady had put the food on the table for us, and this kid come running in screaming, "Fascista, fascista!" And the old man get out the back door and go. So we took off, didn't get a bite. Yeah, I felt kind of sad about that, because a few minutes later I heard damn machine gun fire. Evidently they machine gunned that family because they was trying to help us. The Germans had dropped leaflets all over the place with a death penalty to any Italian that aided any Allied prisoner escaping. So I guess those people paid the price for trying to help us. And on a couple of other occasions we had some fairly close shaves, mostly along the same order. And in this one little town, I can't recall the name, we skirted it. Most of the little towns were built on top of the hills, or top of the mountains. And the reason for it was it had open sewers, and the sewage run down the mountain and collected in the first big hole it come to. But we had skirted this little town and was moving on out, and the moon came out. And it had been partly cloudy, and we got a little stretch of moonlight, and we came up on this huge pit that had been gouged out, looked like with bulldozers, and it was full of bodies. And we had wondered, coming around the mountain, why we heard nothing. No bells, no church, church bells. It was always ringing, and this town was silent. So as we went by this pit of bodies, I don't know, they looked like there was several hundred of them or more, just stacked in it, wasn't even covered up. And this young guy come out of the brush, and Doan spoke to him. And he was, I guess, one of the only few survivors that had managed to hide. And he told us the Germans had machine gunned those people because one of their soldiers had been killed in the city. So we moved on south. We had no knowledge that the Allies had invaded Italy. We knew Sicily had been invaded, but Italy we didn't know. Later we found out that they had invaded, landed at Salerno, and we kept hearing, at night we began to hear artillery duels, heavy gunfire over to our west. Then we started seeing, in daytime we was hiding out. We followed a national highway right down the middle of Italy. We kept seeing German units moving north, tank units, panzers. And by the time we got down to just north of Potenza, where we had originally gone in, they took us when we were first captured, we got into about a 3-day battle there where we had to hide out day and night on a hill, and we'd watch the fight going on. The Germans started pulling out, and I know this one evening we decided we were going to move on down, and they came around a kind of a goat trail around a circle and around the side of the mountain, and suddenly I looked into brush, and something didn't look right, and I signaled to Doans I was leading. We always walked about 50 yards or so apart. We never walked together. In case one got hit, the other had a chance of getting away. But anyway, I signaled Doans, and we slipped off the side of the trail into brush. I kept looking, and I realized finally that it was a muzzle brake on a Tiger Royal tank. The Germans had pulled this division back. Well, at the time I didn't know it was a division, but we moved off, and the Germans, I thought we'd had it, but they was all asleep. I could see them sleeping on the tank, on the ground around it, so they felt safe and they hadn't posted any guards. That's all that saved us. So we moved down the hillside and across this small valley, and as we were moving through there, we could see under every clump of trees or anything that would hide a tank or an armored vehicle, it was all over it. And we'd stumbled in right into the middle of a bivouac area in a damn Panzer division. I never wanted to run so bad in my life, but you couldn't. If you had, it probably would have alerted them that we was prisoners. I guess they thought we was a couple of battalions that didn't have any sense walking across there. As luck would have it, it didn't bother us. I never did see any movement of any of them, so I don't know whether they saw us or not. But we walked about a mile across that damn valley, and you talk about being scared, brother, I was. Later, all night, we sat up on the side of a mountain and watched the Germans firing at the Americans. Well, it wasn't Americans, it was the British 8th Army. They was firing into the German positions, and the Germans was firing into their positions. We watched the shells go back and forth. You could see them, these big shells, going the other way. And finally, just started cracking daylight. This little boy, things had quieted down, and this little boy come walking around the trail alongside about halfway up this hill where we was hiding. And Dones whistled at him and came up and he asked him about the Germans, Tedeschi. He said, no, Americans was in the village. He asked him if there was Germans in the village, and he said, no, Americans. And I was a little bit leery. I didn't know there wasn't any Americans there, and I didn't know whether he was setting us up or not. Well, Dones was all for taking off and going on in. I said, look, man, we better kind of take it easy and find out for sure what's in there. So we made this little boy walk in front of us. I guess he was probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old, to show us where they were. So we went around the edge of the town, the outskirts. Finally, we crossed a little dry wash and come up on the road on the opposite side. And there was a British unit. We found out later it was a Canadian 48th Highlanders, part of the British 8th Army, and they was having breakfast, tea, mostly English, but they called them Canadian 48. The unit was the 48th Highlanders. And we come up out of that brush. I never saw so many guns in my life. All pointed at us. I started hollering, hey, whoa, stop, man, I'm American. And so they finally shook us down over and questioned us a while. Finally, they was convinced that we were what we said we were. So they took us up to this British brigadier, and we spent the better part of the day him debriefing and questioning us about the Germans we'd seen, troops, positions, and all this stuff. So then he put us in a, believe it or not, a Rolls-Royce staff car and took us on down to Taranto, Italy, where the American headquarters was at the time. And that about ends the thing. From there, we spent about 3 days there, got cleaned up, uniforms and everything. Then they shipped us, or give us the authorization for air travel. We went back to Sicily, to Tunis, reported into Northwest African Air Force, which was commanded by General Jimmy Doolittle at that time. And he spent us about 6 hours giving us a hard time. And from there, we found out that my group, the 44th, was stationed. They had come back to Africa and were stationed just outside Tunis at the old city of Carthage. So I asked for transportation out there, and they said they didn't have any transportation. So we was on our own. We went down out of the headquarters and across the parking lot and spotted this Jeep. And we jumped into that gum thing, fired it up, and took off. We got about 6 miles out of town and ran out of gas. We started walking. As we went, I walked around to the front of the Jeep and started walking away. I looked back, and here's 2 stars on plate on the front bumper. So evidently I had stolen General Doolittle's Jeep and didn't know it. But I didn't care. He didn't even have the damn decency to give us transportation or tried to get us back to our group. Anyway, short time later, a 6-by come along, picked us up, took us on out to 44th. And I ran into one of the guys and I asked him, where's General Johnson's headquarters? And he pointed the tent out. They had set this tent up. So Dones and I started walking towards it. And I got noticing every step we take, old Dones was trying to take a step and a half on me to get in front. So we got within about 50 yards of that tent, man, I cut loose and took off. I run through the door, the flap of the damn tent. General Johnson, Colonel Posey, Colonel Bean was all sitting at the table talking. And when I come through the damn door, like scared them to death. And I came to a screeching halt and reported to General Johnson. And anyway, I was the first man to make it back to the group after being shot down and captured and escaped and all that good stuff. So, Ellis, that about does it, except I stayed in service for 25 years and retired. And I'd like to add one thing about freedom. Most people take it for granted and they feel that it's free. Well, it isn't free, my friend. And you really don't know what it is until you lose it. When you lose the freedom to do pretty much as you please, where you can't do a thing without somebody giving you permission, even to go to the bathroom, then you will know what freedom really is. And that's what happens to you when you become a prisoner of war. They tell you what to do, when to do it, how much, and everything else. So don't ever feel that freedom is free just because it's there. Somebody bought it for you the hard way. I hope I put this down the way you wanted it. If I didn't, well, give me hell the next time you see me.